watching the news this week, it has been difficult. We know. You are surely not alone in that feeling.
Yeah, but there are ways to deal with it and cope with what's happening. So let's bring in psychotherapist Dr. Robi Ludwig. Dr. Robi, good to see you. It's hard that we have to see you during this time. So first, let's talk about many of the images that we're seeing on TV and social media. This is not new, right? We cover a lot of difficult things, but this is uniquely graphic, right? It's a war, and it can be a real source of stress and trauma for people. So can anything be done other than just turning away from your screens?
Yeah, I mean, this is unprecedented, and we're seeing evil in front of our eyes. And people who do tend to watch more of these images do suffer from more acute stress. So it's very important to ask yourself and know yourself, how much can you actually tolerate before it becomes paralyzing for you? If it's putting you into a state of high anxiety and depression, reduce the amount of images that you see. There are ways to keep up on the news without putting your mental health at risk.
Should mention that we're being very careful to not show the most graphic things, and when we do, we're warning people ahead of time. But so if you do, Dr. Robi, see things and watch, and you're in it, how do you process that? Like, what do you do to process what you've heard and seen?
I think these things are really hard to process because we're not used to seeing these kinds of images or hearing these kinds of stories. They almost don't seem real. And so the best thing to do, and I was speaking to somebody who is Israeli, she has sons and a grandson in the war, and what they do is they focus on how can you be purposeful? How can you focus on your community? How can you give and be a source of giving? So when you start to think about how you can use your emotions and knowledge about the story in terms of doing something good for others, that could be tremendously helpful.
Yeah, that's so good. And I'm glad you said we're not used to seeing this. We're also just not meant to, in a way, right? War, harming each other, that should not be happening. Can we dig into generational trauma? I know so many marginalized communities talk about that when incidents affect our community. I know with this war, so many families are talking about they come from generations of Holocaust survivors, and that can add to the stress of what's going on.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've heard a lot of the Jewish community talk about this is like an open wound, and it feels so deeply personal. But generational trauma is not a personal trauma. It's what groups often feel who have been oppressed or marginalized in some way. And they were doing studies and found out that their response to certain kinds of traumas that happen to them as a group gets experienced very differently. And I think among the Israeli community, I think we see the trauma, but they try to meet up with a certain kind of resilience so that there's a grieving without crumbling and a desire to show up and thrive.
And if we want to support friends, family members who are having maybe a more difficult time for whatever reason, what does that look like right now?
So it's showing up and being present, asking your friends, what can I do for you? How can I help? It's being pragmatic. There are many charities out there who are vetted where you can donate your money, you can donate your time, you can donate resources. And I'm sure that there are links up where people can find how they can be a source of good and donate their time and money in a way that can make a difference.
Yeah, because that always, I mean, volunteering, doing things for others always makes you feel better in any situation, I feel.
Service goes far.
And it's really needed. So there's mental health resources that are needed. There's medical resources needed. And so there are lots of different ways to find out how you can be a source for making a difference in a really pragmatic way.
Dr. Robi